I think we're good. I'll go ahead and intro. Our panel is titled, My Data, My Choice, a Digital Bill of Rights for Texas. And as I'm sure all of you are aware, virtually everything we're doing digitally now is being monitored, tracked, collected, packaged, transferred, sold. And currently the reality is, despite all the collective brain power we have in this room, we're all subject to the same reality in Texas, and that's we have virtually no control over what's being collected or the ability to opt out, knowing where it's going. And scary as that is, I'm thankfully joined by an incredible panel who are going to, yes, talk about why you should be afraid, but also why there's hope in Texas and really across the nation as we lead on this issue. And so without further ado, I'm going to kick to our panelists, starting with Representative Giovanni Capriglione. Thank you for joining us, sir. Representative Capriglione was elected to the Texas House in 2012 and is currently serving his 5th term, representing House District 98. And he was recently appointed to chair on the House Committee on Pensions and Investment Financial Services, and serves on the House Committee on Elections and the Select Committee on Youth Health and Safety. In addition, he has the important role of serving as chair of the IT, the Innovation and Technology Caucus. And among many other things, he has been just a stalwart for Texans and what we talk about at TBPF of keeping Texas Texan, whether it's budget issues, healthcare, technology. So we're very glad to have the representative join us here today. And to the left of Representative Capriglione, we have Briana Gordley. And she's joining us from Texas Appleseed and their Fair Financial Services Project as a policy analyst, where she works to advocate for reforms for consumer protection, data privacy, and emerging financial technology products. And prior to joining Texas Appleseed, Briana worked directly with survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, and stalking to address the physical and financial safety needs and assist survivors in achieving self-sufficiency and stability. And that's an important aspect of the issue we're talking about today, so we're very glad to have you join us as well. And then finally, because it wouldn't be a tech panel without a virtual attendee, we have Mr. Ryan Harkins joining us today. Ryan serves as the Senior Director of Public Policy for Microsoft, and in that role, he works on issues relating to technology and civil liberties, including state and federal privacy legislation. He's a 15-year veteran of the company and has testified before numerous legislatures. In fact, I had the chance to hear him before the Texas House Business and Industry Committee on data privacy. And he's a frequent speaker at conferences. We're going to have to add to that list now, Ryan, and other events. I'm also excited to say that he is a non-resident fellow at Stanford Center for Internet Society and adjunct professor at Seattle U, where my uncle is a soccer coach, so excited to have that. And so without further ado, I'd really like well, first, please join me in welcoming our incredible panelists that we have here today. I'm so excited to jump into this topic we have here today. So, Representative Capriglione, I'd like to really start with you. So you've been working on this issue in some capacity for well over half a decade now, and first, thank you for your leadership on this issue and your vision on it. I'd love for all of us to hear kind of what was the impetus for you getting involved in this issue? Why is it something that you believe demands strong leadership on?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me. Thank you all for being here. I mean, I guess what the impetus is a desire to follow the Constitution, to understand exactly what's happening when you are playing on your phone or you're going on the internet. And a lot of people don't 100% understand what it means when you have a phone and you're able to go to websites for free, right? Oh, this is cool, I have a mapping tool, I have this or I have that. I would say if there's one thing that really struck home for me was when my daughter, who was 12 years old at the time, she had a cell phone, like a lot of, by the way, people younger than 12 do. And she's like, hey, Dad, can I have a copy of my birth certificate? I'm like, okay, why would you're not gonna get it, but why do you want it? And she's like, well, I have this app, it's an astrology app, and it's asking me for information from my birth certificate. And I mean, that's everything from, where she was born, what time she was born, her parents' information, and so on. It turns out that millions of people enter in information that way. But the more I looked into it, I realized that's the most overt way of asking for your information. Whether you're sitting here, whether you're driving here, the amount of data that's being collected on you is just astronomical. It's who you're talking to. You can easily find out who's in this room and who's not, who's at the next political event and who's not. It's about how much you weigh, how many steps you took that day, where do you go shopping, what did you buy, did you go to church last Sunday or did you not? You know, that's the kind of information that's being collected all the time, and it's not that hard to get to your scary point.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative. And Briana, I'd be remiss not to incorporate you into this, and the research you all have done at Texas Appleseed echoes a lot of what Representative Capriglione, the personal stories and what we've heard from friends, family, et cetera. I know you have a lot of those as well, too. Anything from your research you kind of want to unpack to get things started?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear me? So we're good, awesome. So like the representative said, his awareness into how intrusive technology is came to him from a story with his daughter. And so a lot of our research and our knowledge comes from my direct services with survivors of domestic violence. When we have people specifically at shelter, so we'll have clients come into shelter, we're trying to help build them up, we're trying to help get them safe. And then all of a sudden we have an abuser knocking at the door and we're stressed and we're wondering, how did they find her? And it's because of the vast amount of data that is collected from your address to your email to your favorite color to your educational status. And this was a problem that hit us right in the face when we realized, oh, her safety is in danger. And so coming to Texas Appleseed from doing a lot of direct services, we saw a need. We weren't sure where we fit in yet. We just knew, like David had said, technology has touched all spaces of all the services we've done. And as a consumer protection advocate, we realized we have to enter into this space somehow to protect our most vulnerable population. So like the representative said, the data collected on us is immense. And for people who are going through different personal struggles, or for us up here who are doing our day-to-day lives, we don't always have the time to understand what's being collected. We may not have the knowledge. And I think that's why we're up here now, to help break down some of that barrier between technology and data and help you all understand why this issue is so crucial for all Texans.
Absolutely, and certainly the education awareness component is crucial to it, just understanding. There's no way your young daughter has a strong command over what it means when you're divulging really sensitive information. And as I mentioned, where we stand today, this is currently not something that is regulated or overseen in Texas. And Ryan, you've got a really good pulse, both industry side and in your work in other state houses across the country, of where the policy regime is. So I'd love if you can provide us a 30,000-foot view of what's happening federally, what's happening in different states that you're keeping an eye on. Kind of let us know what is the status quo across the country.
Sure. So first, David, thank you, and thank you to the Texas Public Policy Foundation for having me. By the way, I think I walk by your uncle and his practices every morning when I go into class. But in any event, the United States has been far behind the rest of the world in terms of regulating data protection and privacy. Traditionally, the United States has taken a very different approach to regulating data than other parts of the world. So in Europe, for instance, our friends in the European Union have long had a comprehensive data protection law in place. They had something called the Data Protection Directive, which was passed in 1995. They updated it just a few years ago with something that you may have heard of, the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. And those laws address all privacy issues across all industries and sectors in one place. In the United States, we have traditionally taken sort of a laissez-faire approach to regulating data. So rather than having a comprehensive law in place to regulate all industries and all issues, we've had narrow issue-specific or sector-specific laws. So we have HIPAA and the High-Tech Act, which addresses privacy in healthcare. We have the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, which addresses the collection of personal information from kids under 13 online. But we haven't had a broad-based law in place. And arguably, that was a benefit when the commercial internet was in its infancy. You don't want to impose regulations when you have new industries and startups, et cetera. You want to allow those sort of enterprises to take fruit. But we're now at a place where it has become clear that the internet is relatively mature, and there are very real risks that have come to the forefront that people are concerned about, and privacy is among those. And so, thankfully, you've started to see lawmakers in the United States take action. And the action has primarily been at the states, the laboratories of democracy. The federal government still has been unable to pass a comprehensive privacy law, but in 2018, our friends in California became the first state to pass a comprehensive privacy law when they passed the California Consumer Privacy Act. Now, there are issues with the law that California passed. It was thrown together in about a week and a half, but it was significant because it was the first. Since then, we've seen the floodgates open, and we've seen 4 additional states all pass comprehensive privacy laws that more or less take concepts and terminology from the European Union's privacy law, the Data Protection Directive, now the GDPR, and pass laws that, in our view, are a bit more streamlined. And so that includes the states of Virginia, the states of Colorado, Connecticut, and Utah. And we've seen a ton of other states introduce their own bills, including, of course, in the state of Texas. And we're thrilled to see and would applaud Representative Capriglione for his leadership in bringing a comprehensive bill forward. We have seen additional activity at the federal level. So just this past summer, the House Energy and Commerce Committee passed the American Data, the ADPA, the American Data Protection and Privacy Act, out of committee by a vote of 53-2, which indicates, of course, to us and what we've seen across states that this is a bipartisan issue. There are folks on the left and the right, all of whom agree that we need clear rules of the road in place, both to allow consumers to control their data and to give industry clear guardrails so that they know what they can and cannot do with data as they attempt to innovate. And so we're heartened by all of this activity, and we've been trying to support efforts by lawmakers across the country to advance privacy laws and start to reform the way we regulate data in this country.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. And to underscore the point of bipartisanship on this, we have some cards that have been passed out on the chairs throughout the room. 9 out of 10 Texans agree that the consumers, us, the creators of our data, should have control and agency over that information. Put Texans in the driver's seat on that. And as important as it is to underscore that, it's not been an easy fight, right? And I know Representative Capriglione, you have something to say about Texas not being on that list right now. House Bill 4, for those of you that were at the breakfast this morning where Speaker Phelan talked about various priorities, he talked about the Texas Data Privacy Security Act. And I'd love for you to talk about what it is. You've done a tremendous job drafting, and it's working its way through the legislature right now.
Sure, and I guess to the point about there was a goal, an idea that the federal government would do this. And what I would say is they can't pass a balanced budget. The idea that they would somehow be able to go and work on comprehensive privacy is probably a long way from here. So how many of you all, and I know we're doing this in video, so some people won't see this, but how many people here have been at a website, you've forgotten your password, and now you're gonna go through try and get your password back or get a new password, right? And then sometimes it'll go and it'll say, okay, well, to get your password, you gotta answer your secret questions, right? Like, what was the name of your first dog? And many of you have done that. And then you don't remember, right, what you had done or how you had spelled it. So just a couple of days ago, it was reported in the Texas Tribune that some Asian cartel or cartels were able to go and find data about Texans on the dark web, and they were then able to use that information to go and effectively get driver's licenses, fake driver's, real driver's licenses from other people. And so that's where your data can end up, right? So it's not just about, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong, what does it matter? It's about who can get access to that data. And now my constituents are asking me, why does it take me 6 hours at DMV to go get my driver's license, but the Asian cartel can do it online, right? And part of that reason is because other people know more information about you than you do. You don't know the answers to those questions. I tried to do it. It's hard to go and get that. And so when I started working on this a long time ago, I remember our first stakeholder meeting that I was at, and I had literally hundreds of people calling in. I mean, probably 100 people showed up in person opposed to this legislation, because this does translate into money for other people, right? But we've been working with all of our stakeholders, we've been working with our constituents, and we've slowly but surely, I think, been able to get people to be educated on this topic. And I would hear from the very beginning, hey, listen, my client is 100% opposed to your bill on privacy, but I am totally for it, right? Because this is about my kids' information, right? This is about my wife's information. What do you mean they know where I've been and who I've been talking to? And so through that process, we've been able to get more and more people on board. And I'm so thankful to Speaker Dade Phelan taking this bill. And if you don't know kind of how the bills work, obviously the lower the number, the better. HB1 is the budget. So I originally filed this, I think it's HB 1800 something, and he was more than kind enough to make it HB4, right? So it's a priority for the Texas House. And now, also, thankfully, a lot of my conversations with these people have become more serious.
Right, yeah. So the antenna has shot up, that's for sure. Well, I mean, that's all fantastic news and speaks a lot to all the folks who've been working, you really shepherding folks together in that. I want to clarify, he's being very humble. It is not easy to be this thoughtful, to be this patient, and to be this considerate throughout this process. I mean, it's not like snap of the fingers, you have a bill introduced and it's going through. We're talking about some very heavy hitters who, you know, initially there's pushback on this bill, but we're starting to see really that light at the end of the tunnel. And you brought up the Asian cartel story, and Briana, I know a lot of what we've talked about, what we really kind of initially bonded on this issue is data brokers. And so that's an example of one category of third-party data collectors that can end up with your information through scouring on what you're posting online or through purchasing it through other companies. It's a lot scarier than it sounds, and I know you're a great expert on that. Do you want to talk about data brokers for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for teeing me up there. I think the representative said it really well. It doesn't matter how private you believe you are, how protected and safe you believe you feel. There are millions of pieces of data collected on all of us. It's really hard to operate in today's society without a cell phone, without ways to get here, without ways to do things, to connect to people, to have jobs. And so whether you like it or not, there's data out there on you. And there are certain businesses who saw that as an opportunity to employ in their business model, which is why we have data brokers. Data brokers are businesses that us on an individual level have no direct relationship with, but that have a lot of information on us because they purchase that data from parties we do have business with. So when I go to Target.com and I click agree to their privacy policy that's 30, 40 pages long because I don't have the time to read it, I'm just then signed up and agreed to say, hey, you can sell any data that I gave to you to a third-party data broker. And so it's a business model, and we absolutely understand that. From my perspective, yes, I'm a policy analyst, yes, I'm a social worker, but I'm a victim advocate first. And so when we're looking at all of these issues, we say, okay, this may be great, but who's really being harmed and where is the bad? And when it comes to data brokers, there are some really bad actors out there who will take advantage of the information that's on us, whether it be purchasing personal data on us to answer questions, to obtain a license through the dark web, or if it's trying to find your address to find and kill you, which has happened to so many survivors of domestic violence. If you heard my testimony last year with the business and industry hearing on data privacy, I told a story about Amy Boyer, who was a 21-year-old nurse, recently graduated from school, and had a stalker who she was not aware of, because that's what a stalker is. And he wanted information on her, and he didn't know how to find it. They went to high school together, he lost contact, and he wanted to continue to perpetrate this type of abuse on her. He went online and he purchased her social security number for $45 from a data broker. Through that, he was able to access her house, where she works, the work she does, and he showed up to her job and killed her. And then he killed himself. And when I tell this story, it's like people don't believe me, but these are the real life stories of how everyday people, survivors, vulnerable groups can and will be affected by a lack of data privacy protections comprehensively, which is where we enter into the space. You also have bad actors who are not as dramatic with murder, but who will say, okay, let me get your social security number so I can take out a loan in your name and continue to financially exploit you. These things happen, we see them. And so we enter into this space of working with the representative. I'm a frequent flyer in the representative office, and he knows this because we're here to protect all Texans. And so that's what the legislative process is about. You have different perspectives, you have competing values. I know the representative has taken on so much of that brunt to get a bill like this filed, and we respect that, and we know that that's what goes into this process. And the data broker industry, as one of the most pervasive, they're not regulated. It's hard to know who the players are, and from an individual day-to-day standpoint, you don't even know what I'm even talking about until you're doing the work. And so that's just one piece of data privacy concerns that we have at Texas Appleseed, in addition to tons of other concerns just about giving Texans the right to know what's being collected, to access that data, and to control what happens to it.
So well said. I think I've heard that story 2-3 times, and it's still, to Briana's point, it doesn't seem real, though I imagine you ask folks that you know who maybe have had a personal friend, family member, maybe not victims of direct stalking and killing as a consequence, but it's pervasive. And Briana, you also mentioned some of the rights. And so this panel is Digital Bill of Rights, which is kind of an informal term to describe House Bill 4 and other bills that we've seen in other state houses. So I'll open the floor on this one. Ryan, Briana, Representative, feel free to chime in. What are some of those rights entail? So this bill passes, right? Governor signs it, and it goes into law September of this year. If that happens, what are the rights that Texans will have, and how will that get at some of the root cause issues that we're talking about? Please.
Okay, I think, the most important thing, and I think this panel is part of it, is the right to know, right? You have the right to know and become educated about what the issues are, right? Like you said, you get, if you go to a website today, every time you go, it'll say accept cookie or reject, right? And you probably 90% of the time hit accept. And what you agreed to was exactly that, which is, yeah, you could collect all my information, but read it sometime. Like just sometime, just go and read what it says. You will be horrified. Even things like, well, what happens if I give up my account? We're going to still keep tracking you, right? I mean, that's what's in that, and that's what you're agreeing to. So what this bill does is, first of all, you have the right to know, a simplified way of knowing. You shouldn't have to go and be a lawyer, no offense, but no reason to be a lawyer to do that. See what information has been collected to be able to correct that information if it's wrong. We have special items for if you're a minor versus not a minor, right? And also the right to go and essentially say, I want you to get rid of it. I want to opt out. I don't want you to collect this sensitive information anymore. Oh, and by the way, I would like to be off of your list. And I mean, this is just basic stuff that you think that you already essentially have, and you don't. But there's another piece of it too, which is you need to protect it if you're going to hold on to it, right? I mean, it's a mutual shared obligation. When you send someone an email, I know a lot of you think, okay, well, I sent it through my email app. Well, where is that email, right? Yeah, it's not on your cell phone, right? You have it somewhere else being stored. There's an obligation on the other party's side to go and protect that from prying eyes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Briana, Ryan, anything you'd like to add there?
I mean, I might jump in, David, and just say I would again compliment Representative Capriglione for the bill that he's put forward. I mean, we've been at this for some time. You know, we first started calling for comprehensive privacy legislation in the United States in 2005. And the reason was we could see even back then growing distrust in the public, in technology, in the technology industry. And the only way, in our view, to start to earn some of that trust back is to pass new laws. Laws that will give industry clear rules of the road so that it can continue to innovate responsibly. But laws that, to Representative Capriglione's point, provide people with the rights that are necessary to control their data. And that's what his bill would do. We think, among other things, not only would his bill give people rights to control their data, the right to know, as he mentioned, the right to access your data, the right to correct it, the right to delete it, and importantly, the right to exercise some form of consent over the collection and use of sensitive data and over sensitive data processing activities, tracking you for targeted advertising, selling your data, etc. But it also does a great job of getting the definitions right. And, at the risk of getting wonky and really boring real fast, the definitions in particular in this area are incredibly important, because for any privacy law to be credible, it has to apply to modern online data sets, the kinds of data sets that are used to track and target consumers on the internet today. And those data sets are, like, to use terms of art, they're not just identified data, so data stored with your name or your email address or your mailing address. They are identifiable. They're data that can be used to identify you indirectly. So it's data that's stored with a cookie ID or an IP address or a device identifier. And so those kinds of data sets have to be subject to the rights that you're giving consumers. And his bill does a great job of doing that.
Absolutely, well said. And what you hit on there, Ryan, is the notion that technology moves faster than policy. And I think many of us would say, in a lot of respects, it's a good thing, because if Congress is passing thousands and thousands of laws every week, we might have issues. And keep in mind the mantra and the philosophy of a lot of these technology companies, Facebook in particular in the early 2010s, was move fast and break things. And in many respects, Ryan, what you're hitting on is the responsible guardrail notion that I know we're all in agreement here on the stage. And what does it look like? We talked about technology being a tool to unleash that good, and really a restoration of trust in the consumer and the user, which is begotten by that control and agency. And Ryan, if it's okay, because you hit on this, the next question I wanted to ask is kind of in the vein of what you're suggesting with providing these clear rules of engagement. And with your perspective, I'd love to hear how industry, digital ethics, and government regulation should fit together in putting up these responsible guardrails, while also ensuring that we have the key technological innovation and development, because we want Texas to be the preeminent leader in that. So it's not an easy puzzle to piece together, but Ryan, curious if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think we are at a place where we need laws. There is a role for, say, self-regulation and industry ethics and getting companies to do the right thing voluntarily, and I think that's important. Microsoft, for instance, is one of the few companies to have stated that we provide the rights that are at the heart of the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation to consumers worldwide, even though we're not legally compelled to do so. We provide the rights that are at the heart of California's privacy law to consumers across the United States, even though we're not legally compelled to do so. Why do we do that? We think it's important to establish trust with our customers and with consumers. But we're at a place where I don't think we can rely any longer on the entire industry just doing the right thing. And so, I would encourage my colleagues in industry, and many more have come around to this point of view, to make their voices heard in the legislative process, but to get on board with the idea of there being strong and credible privacy laws that both provide consumers with the rights to control their data while providing clear rules of the road to industry. And a lot of those laws, they not only will provide consumers with rights, it is necessary, but in my view, not sufficient solely to provide consumers with rights. You also need to impose affirmative obligations on companies to be responsible stewards of the data they collect. And so that can look like things like requiring companies to engage in impact assessments of their data processing activities, to professionalize the way they think about the collection and use of data, to exercise appropriate data hygiene. And that may sound awfully boring, and perhaps it's job security for lawyers, but that literally means you have people on staff who are responsible for doing this. You should have clear policies in place. You should identify all of the data you're collecting, why you're collecting it, and evaluate the benefits and risks of doing that. And therefore, put in place appropriate protections to protect your consumers' data. It can mean other things, requirements like data minimization, purpose specification, a responsibility to appropriately secure, as Representative Capriglione mentioned, the data you're collecting. And there may be other obligations that we haven't thought of yet that would be helpful. But I think it's important for the United States in particular, and for states like the state of Texas, to start taking steps to pass laws, to start putting those clear rules of the road in place.
Yeah, very, very well said, Ryan. And I know in House Bill 4, there's data minimization and this idea of like the security hygiene aspect. And I'll say I defer to you, sir, on this. I know your background as a computer engineer. You understand the technical nature of this, and kind of a point that's been echoed throughout is we're talking about not the data inputs of 2001. We're talking high velocity, high variety, et cetera, et cetera. Are there any security aspects that you want to hit on? Because I know that's a crucial component of bringing both privacy and that security together for the long term of looking at what's to come technologically.
Sure, and on this, and I really kind of started working on cybersecurity way back in the day on this. So for me, data is the literal nexus of security, privacy, your rights, because when we say data, and you've heard us use that word a million times, but just to be clear, it's your name, it's your address, it's your voice, it's your fingerprint, it's a picture of your face, your biometric data, it's who you are. And if that information is not being securely held, then ultimately people can impersonate you, right? They can become you, and we're seeing that find its way in terms of whether it's phishing attacks, email attacks, or deep fakes on the other level where people are literally impersonating you and then able to access other accounts that you have. And what I will say is, whether it's the data in 2001 or the data in 2020, the next thing that you're hearing about, and has become bigger and bigger, is artificial intelligence, right? We're all hearing about ChatGPT. Maybe you're all participating in ChatGPT. But keep in mind, that's something that's been trained on data. It's been trained on information that has come from data brokers, has come from others, and it's just spitting out essentially what you've told it to do. And we have to be careful with not just if that data is being used to do fraud, but how it actually becomes more ingrained in all of us. And kind of Ryan's point, and not that this is an ad for Microsoft, but I will say that Microsoft is one of the very few companies that, from my very first version of this bill years ago, doing it now, because they understand that someday all of your emails are going to come out. Every single thing that you've done, every search you've ever made on Google is going to be out there. And they realize that that would be bad for business if they were not trying to stop it. And I look at it in the everyday world. If you knew that there was a supermarket that told everybody what you bought and when you bought it and how much you had in your checking account and all of that stuff, you wouldn't frequent that supermarket. And so I'm glad there's companies who are changing their own what data what they're collecting. I mean, if you don't need someone's social security number to do the work, don't ask for it. That's the fastest way to protect the data, right? And I think companies are now realizing the massive risks they face by doing that.
Absolutely. And to the point of the changing landscape of data, we have a research paper at TBPF, and it opens with a story. I remember, I'm just old enough to remember, in 2012, and this was huge breaking news, Target had sent coupons to a father advertising baby products, diapers, formula, et cetera, that was addressed to his daughter. And he's, my daughter's not pregnant. Why are they sending this? How presumptuous of them. sure enough, he ended up finding out the next week that his daughter was pregnant. And this is 2012. This is 2012. More than a decade has gone by, and the rules are still not clear, but the data collection is clearer and more granular. And that's just one of many stories. And I know, Representative, you brought up how there's so many other issues too. We're looking at biometrics, so we're looking at artificial intelligence, and fits in that category of tool, right? And Briana, I know you guys are focused on a lot of the technology issues, and so kind of in that vein, are there some additional ways that we can continue as either users to be informed on, or as lawmakers continue to lead on to ensure we're really keeping up as best we can with privacy safeguards for Texans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the data privacy movement is a movement of the people. I think once people became aware of these data breaches, Equifax being one of the biggest ones, people started to have questions and ask what really is going on. And so in a lot of the conversations we have with TPPF, with the representative's office, with our other stakeholders, with survivors, with individual people, we learn that one of the biggest barriers is just understanding what's really happening and what we're all talking about up here today. And so when we think about future reform, because when if House Bill 4, does pass, of course, we want to build on those protections. We don't want to assume that protections stop here. We always want to ensure that Texas is a leader in granting its citizens these civil liberties of data privacy protections. And so when I talk about understanding your rights, we think a lot of, at Appleseed, developing resource guides, right? Helping the representative's office, asking the Attorney General to put together a one-pager, to put together a resource, just for people to understand now what their new rights will be under this piece of legislation, how they can actually access those rights, whether it is to just know what if a company has data on you, to opting out completely in the digital process, how to complain if those rights aren't granted to you, how to put pressure on businesses to grant you those rights that they're not legally required to do. It's a lot of the consumer protection work we do is education, just helping people understand their rights. And in that builds a lot of different innovation and different ideas to enhance protections. And so it's definitely not a stop, but it's absolutely a step forward. And we're really looking forward to continuing the conversation and engaging in the process.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. And that's something our campaign is focused on too, is everything is continually changing. And we look at, I know our policy director's in the back, Zach Whiting always jokes with me about all these Roomba articles about how they're now taking pictures of the inside of our house. And we didn't think about this 5 years ago. What are we not going to think about 5 years from now? And I'll add too, for folks who are interested in continuing to learn about this, I recently rewatched The Social Dilemma. If you have not seen that, I know it's a bit oxymoronic. I'm telling you to go on Netflix where they're collecting your data to watch something. But it's a fantastic documentary that has folks who were the head of engineering at Facebook, creating the like button, or engagement apparatuses on Twitter. And it talks about how that tool has evolved, and that Wild West mentality has created what the executives at social media companies would say is not what they thought it was going to be. And so it's not necessarily playing cleanup, it's being responsible about what that future is going to entail. As, again, we all agree, we want innovation to happen. There are life-saving benefits, quality of life benefits, so many good things, but we got to keep the head on a swivel, so to speak. And Ryan, so you're a man who always has his head on a swivel. So I want to ask you, as I know we're beginning to wind down here, and I'll open this up to everyone too. I think it's a fun question. What can we do today in Texas with the current policy landscape to better protect our information? What are steps that we can take until we get House Bill 4 passed? What are the steps that we can take today?
I mean, to be honest, I would encourage people to make their voices heard through the legislative process. If you're a Texas resident, I would encourage you to contact your representative to speak up, and to speak up in support of Representative Capriglione and what he's doing. Because the reality is today, look, there are certain things you can do if you can use a browser in secure mode, and you can, if you want, you could even use Tor, something like that, or a VPN to further protect yourself from being tracked when you're online. But the reality is, Texas residents right now have very few rights in law when it comes to control over their data, which is why I think it's so important that HB4 move forward and pass.
Well, and I want to open up kind of to all of us here. Representative Capriglione, there are a number of other bills that I've followed and monitored this session that you're leading on. Any others that you want to speak to, raise awareness on, so to speak?
Sure. There's still an opportunity for other priority bills, so I'll use this as an opportunity. We're working on genetic privacy, something also very similar. A lot of people, I get it, for $79 want to find out how much Italian they are and that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of risks out there too. And then it's a different type of privacy, right? This is like very literally your genetic information that has information about maybe potentially what diseases you have or what your children have and that sort of stuff. So that's another bit of privacy that we're doing. We're doing a lot on cryptocurrency, for instance. I'm sure you've all heard of some of the issues that have shown up, specifically in a company called FTX. We're trying to do some light touch regulation because we believe in a whole bunch of different types of money, but we want people to feel comfortable with that. We're working on artificial intelligence. Again, want to look at how it's being used specifically in government. And then, of course, we're working on trying to get people educated, right? Some of us maybe missed the boat on how all this is working, so we want to make sure that teachers and others become educated so they then can educate our next generation about that. And I agree with everything he has said about what you can do right now. Definitely talk to your legislators and push that, and maybe figure out what Tor is and VPN and all that kind of stuff. But I'll also tell you, at least at a minimum, have a conversation with your kids and grandkids about the issues of putting stuff online. The internet is forever. And you want to make sure that the information that they're putting on, that the photos they're putting on, the text or the direct messages, they would be comfortable having their boss see it, their priest or pastor seeing it, and their spouse seeing it. So I think it's important for us to have those kind of conversations with our families as well.
Absolutely, and I'd be remiss not to add, we do have a panel tomorrow too on keeping kids safe online. In the Senate Judiciary, congressionally had a hearing 2 or so weeks ago, and you hear testimonials from kids who don't recognize what exactly they're posting or what's happening, and they're saying exactly that. Anything you post, expect that it's blown up on a billboard that your bosses are going to see and everyone's going to see along the way. So thank you for the leadership across the board there, Representative. Briana, anything else that you guys are working on too you want to let folks online and in person know about?
Yeah, I think not so much. I kind of want to go back to the question you asked about what you can do today to protect yourself. I think take some time, now that you have some enhanced knowledge, next time you go on a website, review the cookies and see, I can actually uncheck most of these except for the functional ones. I think if you have 30 minutes maybe or so to spare, read a privacy policy. I think the more that we're able to inform consumers of some of the ways that data is being collected, maybe if y'all are able to keep that in mind and just say, okay, let me look at ways I can protect myself. Ryan had mentioned a protective browsing data. You can go on Google Chrome right now, and through your privacy settings, you can click enable to a do not track across site on your browser, and boom, it's one step, a small step, and maybe the scheme of things, but just one thing you can do right now to protect yourself until more comprehensive data privacy laws have passed. As for what we're doing, we're just here engaging in a legislative process. We're helping people understand how their data rights impact them, how a lack of data privacy protections can hurt them in ways that we all can move forward. Despite different views, this is a space where we all agree that we need to do more, and that's what we're trying to do today.
And I'll add 100% yes, and if you're having trouble falling asleep, I found that terms of service are a great replacement for melatonin. So to any of our CLE folks, I challenge you to read through every terms of service for apps you use, and you will come back with pitchforks and find me. So Ryan, I want to turn it over to you as well. You guys are certainly keeping busy at Microsoft. So anything you want to update us on, things to be on the lookout for, or things that you're particularly passionate about right now?
Well, I mean, so on the policy front, you know, there's a lot happening, but we are continuing to be supportive of efforts to pass comprehensive privacy legislation across the country. And we've been at that a long time, and we will continue to do that. There also is a ton happening in AI, as you may have seen, both with the news about ChatGPT, with the news about the new Bing and the like. We're very excited about some of the developments in that space and the prospects that AI can augment the capabilities that we all have to do our jobs, to be more efficient. And I think that a lot will happen and will change in that space over the next couple of years.
Great. Well, with that, we can go ahead and move to the really fun part of the discussion. So now, sorry, me isn't asking questions. You guys are asking the questions. And as a TBPF reminder, our goal here is to have concise questions that end in a question mark. Emphasis on ending in a question mark, please. So I think we have Maggie with the microphone in the back. We'll go to this gentleman right here, up to your right.
Hello, how are you? Thank you, panel members. Great. Thank you, Representative Capriglione. Thank you, sir, for being here. Thank you both. My question is this. I see a lot of children on TikTok, and I see us trying to make laws for the adults. What about the kids? What about, can we get brochures, things that affect them, things that get in PTA and library student and in the schools, things of that nature? I can't get my colleagues off of it. How can I get kids off of it? But I'm giving you a problem. So, thanks.
Yeah, I'll take the first stab at it. You're exactly right. There are several bills. That's why I'm thankful also to the speaker put me on the Youth Health and Safety Committee, because it's a pretty hefty overview of items there, but one of them is specifically related to children and online social media. But I also think you're right, it's an adult and children problem, right? The average person in America is on their phone approximately 40 hours a week, right? If you have an Apple, every Sunday it'll tell you, how many hours you average per day. Well, multiply that number by 7, and you realize just how much time you're spending on social media apps, or if you're just browsing and that sort of stuff, but also how you can and should see how much time your child is spending. A lot of this is targeting our kids, right? They have access to, well, at least mine do, to the Amazon.com account too, right? So they're targeting them, and it is important for the legislature to address those issues as well, 100%.
Yeah, if it's okay. I completely agree. As a Gen Z person myself, I'm pretty engaged with TikTok and recently tried to make the transition. It's an issue. And I know federally we don't have a comprehensive privacy policy, but for children we technically do. And I think a lot of the issues with the Child Online Privacy Protection Act is that it's 13 and younger. And so we're serviced with this question of what happens, or under 13. So what about 13 to 16 to 17 to 18, which is the main demographic for TikTok? I think a lot of it is trying to figure out how to expand current federal protections we have, which is a space we don't have that much power in. But I think that's why this legislative session, you're seeing a lot of bills that are targeting social media efforts to ensure that kids are protected. And I encourage you to take a look at some of them and maybe reach out to your representatives to see, okay, great, on a policy level, this is what we're doing, but what about a community level where our kids are actively involved, where there aren't these restrictions? How can you help develop these flyers for your PTA? I encourage you to reach out because it could have a lot more power than you realize.
And I think HB 18 is a good place to start.
I was going to add very quickly too, Speaker Phelan this morning, in addition to data privacy, it was House Bill 18, Representative Slauson, which is a bill that provides really comprehensive data protections for kids and goes an additional step of finding ways to provide parental tools to empower them to have involvement in that. So yeah, we'd love to connect with you after this. We can talk more about that. All right, let's get some more questions.
David, if I can just jump in, I think there is growing recognition that more needs to be done to protect young people online than, say, what COPPA would do. And that could look like a variety of things. You could ban targeted or the use of data of minors for targeted advertising altogether. You could require opt-in consent from individuals who are, say, 13 to 16 or some other age group before you're able to, collect, sell, share their personal information. And so I think that's an important conversation that needs to happen.
Great. Yes, we'll go to this gentleman over here to the right. I don't know where Mike went. Yeah. And for folks online, the question was about enforcement of the bill and any violations that happen if they infringe on those rights.
Sure. So in every bill, it's not really a law, at least not an effective law, if there's not some way to enforce it, right, with some penalties. So what our bill talks about is essentially starts with someone complaining. Some user feels that their privacy has been violated, and it gives the enforcement mechanism here in Texas to the Attorney General, who then can go in, look at kind of conversation we had before about what is the type of data you've collected, what have you done with that collected. They have to have a data assessment report, and if there's a violation, it's we put at least right now, it's a fine of $7,500 per violation. Just give you an idea, if you have 1 million users times 7,500, that's quite a bit of money. So.
All right, we'll go opposite side of the room here to this gentleman. I feel like we need Jeopardy music as we wait for the mic to slowly, there we go.
So there are a lot of third-party meme-like games out there of the form, your porn name is your childhood pet plus your street you lived on when you were in college. And the responses to these look a lot like the answers to insecurity questions or even to out-of-wallet questions. My first question is this actually deliberate data collection? And the second is there any role for legislation in addressing that?
Either of you like to take that first?
Do you mind? I'm sorry, I didn't get what was the specific question on?
So these are not from like Facebook necessarily. They're these third-party. They're sort of like conversation starters, and it'll say your porn name is your childhood pet plus your street you lived on when you were in college. And the answers to those are, well, those are the answers to your security questions, and they're even the answers sometimes to your out-of-wallet questions, which can take over your life.
So
is that deliberate? That's my first question.
Okay, so like phishing attacks and those types of things where they get that.
Spending your time on Facebook, you must have seen things like this, like
people like send messages to you to try and engage.
Yeah,
you?
so like your best friend will post this, and your entire group on Facebook will start answering these questions.
Oh, you're talking, yeah, I get exactly what you're talking about. Posts. I'm a frequent Facebook person too. It's like a game you play where you'll say the shirt, the color, your favorite color plus the street you lived on is your username. I get exactly what you're saying. Essentially like this idea of it sounds like a moderation problem. I think kind of the root of what that goes back to is more additions to just security questions. So like MFA, multi-factor authentication. I've seen a big uptick in businesses saying, okay, we need more than just security questions. One, because we'll forget them, but two, they're pretty easy to narrow down, especially in attacks. We're able to buy data on you to figure out your mom's maiden name or whatever it may be. And so I know a lot of businesses are really looking to, okay, in addition to people providing information and background on how to access their passwords, we need to have additional security pieces. So MFA, having it tie back to your personal cell phone number. I mean, these are some of the ways I'm seeing change be made on a not policy level. I'm not sure what that does look like policy-wise. I think it's a big undertaking, as has been a comprehensive data privacy law, but it is absolutely a concern. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, I get maybe a little bit. I used to see my wife and daughter, they'd be on BuzzFeed or something, right, where it'd be like, tell us your favorite soda that you would buy today, and we will tell you what your favorite movie was or something. So it's those kind of things to try and get that information to you. One that I'd heard about too, which is that created essentially a fake scholarship. I mean, it was a real scholarship program, right? Which is, okay, you send me all of this information, you being a student who wants to go into college, send me your essay, send me all your personal information, and you'll have a chance to win a scholarship, right? So 60,000 kids, right, in the hopes of getting the scholarship, and they did in fact give a scholarship, one $1,000 scholarship to somebody, and we're able to get this personal information. I think how do you make that into policy is one thing, but to me, it's just like, okay, let's say someone on the street said, hey, what you just said, tell me you're this name and that name, and I think they're a wacko, right? And so when someone does that on Facebook, don't feel comfortable that it's more legitimate just because it's on the computer, right? Just try and think about, why would I tell you what my favorite soda was or favorite movie?
And I'd add just one piece. So in addition to me at TBPF, I'm also a student at UT Austin, Master's in Public Policy, focusing in tech. And cybersecurity is an area I'm focused on now. And one of the pieces that I very fervently believe is that there is no silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity. There's not one single policy you can pass that's going to dramatically change the way that us, the users, engage. And so exactly what's been said, it's the education, awareness, it's leveraging the tools we can, but thinking 10 times before engaging in content, because the reality is phishing attacks, social engineering attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. And the way I think about it, and we think about it at TBPF, is it's a constant warfare, because they're constantly looking to take that information. And for a lot of the attackers, it is life or death. Am I eating tonight because I got this information or not? So just encouraging, again, that's at TBPF. We do a lot of training because we've got a nice target on our backs, but it does help. Just getting educated and becoming more aware of what those threats are.
Can I just on that, because I just want to tell you what you just said on the social engineering perspective, because the most powerful attacks aren't just computer attacks, right? They're combined with some knowledge about who you are, and again, back to the data. So the attacks I used to get on my email is like, hello, friendly American citizen, I'm blah, blah, blah from Nigeria, and I want your stuff, right? That was before. Now, the recent one I go is, hey, Gio, okay, here are the documents that you requested at our meeting, okay? It's gotten a lot more difficult to understand who's friend or foe. You can always pick up the phone and call that person. Before, we've seen actual cases here in Texas where school districts and municipalities have been tricked in wiring tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars someone because of emails that they got. And that could have all been avoided by them making a phone call to their real CFO.
Right. Yep. Ryan, anything to add there?
No, nothing to add. I mean, beyond the fact that, look, cybersecurity is and will continue to be an important issue and a constant threat. The bad guys continue to evolve, and I agree that education and educating your employees and workforce on how to try to avoid those pitfalls is an important piece of the puzzle.
And I, a little biased, but I authored legislation last session to require government employees, all government employees in Texas who use a computer, which is almost all of them, to take training on cybersecurity, to learn about these attacks ahead of time. And then we've made it a full requirement. It's free training. You can go on Department of Information Resources website as well. You can download some of that training. It's great. I mean, it'll help you figure out some of these attacks.
Great.
So the genie's out of the bottle already. All the information that has already been online, I don't know how we can put it back in there. It's a very dark site to look at. There's really no way to prevent all the cyber crime that is about to happen. I know this is a great attempt by Representative Capriglione to hold us to account. What about those companies that, especially from the dark web, that don't have a footprint in Texas? I mean, companies like Microsoft or Google can be taken into account because they have their presence here in the state of Texas.
Sure.
The ones that are based in St. Petersburg in Russia or in North Korea or in Nigeria,
Sure.
there is no way to hold them to account.
Well, I would say, first of all, information gets stale quick, okay? So information, passwords, all that kind of stuff, yeah, maybe your social security number, you probably shouldn't use it for anything other than what's legally required, right? But other information is the more important information. It's what you did today, it's what you're gonna buy tomorrow, right? So how do we go and hold some of these, stop that information from getting on there? I think that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to say, hey, This is now, we're going to go after you. Yeah, I can't go after North Korea, but if I find out that you're the one and you're here in Texas or you're here in Virginia or you're here wherever in the United States, if we find out you're the one that gave them that information because of neglect or because of just pure negligence or whatever, yeah, well, you're responsible. And guess what? They're going to try a lot harder now to protect that information.
And I'd add too, in House Bill 4, when looking at, again, the root cause of a lot of this, your point is correct in that, you can go right now on Facebook and Twitter and you can download the data profile they have on you and you'll see how it's evolved and changed. But when you have the power to opt out of data collection, that's at the root of where exactly that nefarious concern that you're talking about would be cut off, root and stem. And so, again, there's more we can always be doing as users too to monitor that and in exercising those rights too and knowing what can I delete and what do I not want to share. That does hits a huge component of the long-lived concern 10 years from now.
And like for me, all right, so I travel around a lot. Obviously, I don't want people to know where I'm going necessarily, right? And there's other people who think the same way. So yes, I'm upset that somebody could figure out which hotel I was going to stay at a week ago. I'm more worried about the one that they know that I'm going to be there and that I'm only going to be by myself. That means my family's at home, right? So yes, you're right, some information's out there, but what we're trying to stop is what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's exactly what the representative said. Information is stale. And so it can be really overwhelming to think, wow, this data broker has billions of pieces of data on me. What am I supposed to do? And things change every single day. And so we do encourage you to be proactive. The things that you can change now, the businesses you do have business with, to say, hey, opt out, delete my profile. You can reach out to certain different data brokers, talk to me, I'll give you a few, and say, hey, stop collecting my data, or see if that's a right that they give you. All of this to say, with bills in general, most are retroactive. And so what we do is we look at, okay, these are the issues that people have faced, and of course we want to help those people too. And moving forward, we want to enable all of these protections. And so it can be overwhelming and concerning to think, okay, but this stuff is already out there. But a lot of that won't be relevant next week. A lot of it won't be relevant next year. And so it's about trying to do damage control on the things that they do have and being proactive to make sure that they can't take advantage of the information that they may or may not get about you tomorrow, like the representative said.
And I think it's important not to fall prey to despair. I understand the point entirely, but there are things that the public can do to start to take back control of their data. And passing laws is something they can do. And we're seeing a lot of optimism on that front. We not only have the European Union, which updated their data protection law with the GDPR, but we're seeing a growing list of countries around the world pass comprehensive privacy laws, which are largely based upon the GDPR. We're seeing growing numbers of states in the United States pass laws. 5 states now, and hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a few more added to that list, including the state of Texas. You have to start somewhere. And I think HB4 is a great place to start.
Thank you. Aaron Tao, LLC member. This panel briefly mentioned TikTok, and there's, of course, many understandable concerns about this app. I know that the state of Texas banned the use of it on campuses, and also there's also talk at the federal level of an outright ban. But at the same time, one thing is we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because if you look at I don't know if you've been following the protests in Iran, young women, schoolgirls are using the app to dodge government censorship, highlight police beatings, and use it to coordinate efforts and I think in a legitimate revolution to overthrow a generally oppressive government. So basically, how do we strike that balance, ensuring ensure that if we prevent a demographic from accessing this tool that could be used for genuine human liberation and challenge injustice in society? So how do we do that?
Yeah, I'll say I think that's the golden question when it comes to reform in any regard, especially technology. It's balancing the good with the bad. And so I think TikTok is a very unique standard. It's a very new piece of technology that has wide-world implications in ways none of us had expected. And so in that case, to me, it is case by case, as opposed to other different technologies. It's always about trying to find the right balance between bad and good. And I think what is so important about legislative efforts is that it's not just one side dominating and saying, hey, we have to stop this. It's other groups like myself, not with TikTok per se, but other consumer advocacy groups trying to show this other side that you're talking about here, making sure that while we're mitigating the harm, we're not stifling the good. And I think it's always a growing conversation.
No, I agree, but the First Amendment is what I'm basically driving at. Should you be able to go and communicate as an American citizen on any platform you want? So yes, if you look at most of what those, whether they're orders or bills or whatever that's being discussed about TikTok specifically, that's about using government resources, right? Like if you're on government property, if you're a government employee, and what I would tell you is if you're a government employee on government time using government resources, you shouldn't be on TikTok, and you probably shouldn't be on a lot of other things too, right? And so that's what we want to restrict for sure. So I would make the case that was already kind of not allowed, right, to go and do that kind of stuff. But I think as part of it, what it's also helping to do, right, there's certain things that reach the average person, and now people are asking, well, why would they do that, right? Well, why? Because it's deliberately collecting information and it's sending it to other places, and in some cases foreign countries, right? And there have been significant instances where, at least on that app and on others, it has been used, okay, to collect information, in some cases about journalists, and trying to use that to go and try and push them to do or say the opposite thing. Again, I think Americans, we should just have the right to be able to do a lot more, but we just should also have the right to educate ourselves about what that means.
Yeah. Ryan, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think this underscores for us the importance of getting regulation right. And I agree that you want to be careful and ensure that, for instance, in the privacy space, you both provide consumers with the rights they need to control their data. You put clear rules of the road in for industry, but you're also enabling and allowing industry to innovate responsibly. And I think HB4 gets that balance right, and it's one of the reasons we are encouraged and hope that it moves forward.
Great. Well, that about brings us to time here, so let's give a big round of applause to our fantastic panelists.